This morning on BRN, what to consider when aging in place. And we're going to welcome back to the program Deidre Woollard. She is a real estate expert and podcaster. Deidre, always great to see you. Thanks for coming back to the program again this morning.
My pleasure.
So yesterday we talked about a lot of things: mortgage rates, their impact on aging in place. What do you need to think about if you're selling your home? If you're thinking about, I'm going to pick up and leave. I've found the new home that my partner and I are going to live in. What do I need to be thinking about?
Well, the first thing is if you're going to get a mortgage and if you're going to be able to get a mortgage, because getting a mortgage if you only have Social Security or pension income, that can often be challenging. And frankly, if you're older, getting a 30-year mortgage it's difficult. So that's a consideration if you want to pay cash or not. Another consideration is, do you want to live in a 55 plus community? If you're going to resell your property, you're just because it's 55 plus, it's a smaller market. Or do you want to opt for independent living with an option to sort of graduate up as you need more care? So there's a lot of considerations in terms of what you want to do, what you think your future is, because we don't know what's going to happen to us, but we know that at certain points in our life, we're probably going to need more help.
What about proximity? So when I think about moving, I think about a couple things. Just at my age, I think about healthcare. Where can I get access to healthcare? I don't think about schools because I don't have children, but I think about where and proximity to where I work. I work remotely. My wife does not, or she does sometimes. So I think one of the things you probably need to think about is that healthcare component, where and maybe rural areas as opposed to urban areas. Your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So we know housing is cheaper in rural areas, but if you don't have access to care and you don't have access to help, that's going to be a big issue. And also you have to consider maintenance of a house. If you're older and you're living in a rural area, you probably have a lot of land. That starts to become problematic as you age. What happens if there's an emergency? So there's a lot to consider. It's one of the reasons that people are really looking at those communities where they can get that help as time goes on.
What about driving? We did some shows earlier, maybe last year, about Uber Health. People don't always have access to vehicles. In fact, you could maybe lose your ability to drive, just cognitive decline, or maybe don't want to drive anymore. Maybe you can't drive anymore. You lose some of your vision.
I keep hoping that full self-driving is going to solve this problem, but not yet. And so, yeah, Uber has offered services. There are other services. Some of them are even available by phone instead of by app because that's easier for older people. So there are companies that are trying to fill this need, but again, it's mostly concentrated in dense urban areas. So if you're rural and your doctor appointment is a half hour, 45 minutes away, and you have to get a cab or an Uber or something, that's a big expense too.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I've tried to get Uber, just anecdotally, tried to get Ubers in rural areas, and you wait a lot longer. It's certainly not like New York or Chicago or Charlotte. I mean, they're just not as readily available. Uh, Deidre, talking more about buying a home. You mentioned real estate and mortgage rates. You talk a little bit more about the length of a mortgage. If you buy real estate maybe at age 65, chances are you may not make it to the end of the 30-year note. I mean, you could, life, we have great medical, but that's certainly, you want to think about a shorter mortgage. What does that mean? Shorter term
Yes,
mortgage. What does that mean? Sorry.
yeah, statistically, you're probably not going to make it to 95. I mean, we all hope for a good long life, but there's also a difference between lifespan and health span. So, at some point you may, if you're lived to be 95, you may not be living till 95 in your house. So, if you're making this kind of decision, I think it's important to figure out what you're going to want to do with the house. I mean, if you get a 15-year mortgage, that's great, but additionally, you want to figure out if when you pass away, who gets your house, or do you want to sell your house ahead of that, and make other decisions, or put it in a trust with somebody else, or put a child on the deed, put a friend on the deed. So it's just a bit of a different decision than it is when you're younger.
Deidre, what about I feel like, and I know you're not necessarily the expert in some of these areas, but I feel like you have a lot of institutional knowledge. And this is why I'm asking you. I'm not trying to trick you, just so you know. We're friends anyway, so you know you're not going to yell at me. But a trust. Do you put your house in a trust, like a real estate trust or a deed trust, to ensure that if you do pass away, the executor handles the trust appropriately?
It's an option. They're always, it's a little expensive to set up. And it's also a question of who do you put in the trust? Is it you have an executor, but then do you have your children? Do you want to split it up between your children? Do you want that equally? Who does it go to? Or do you want it to be sold and proceeds donated to your favorite charity? So yes, it can absolutely be a good decision. The most important part is deciding what you want. Then everything else, all the little like trust versus putting someone on the deed, all that stuff will figure itself out, and you can talk to professionals about that. But first step is figuring out, really contemplating what your future could look like and which path you want to take.
And who would I talk to? Is that a real estate agent? Are there experts in this area that can help a family figure out what is ideal? I mean, you can certainly use Dr. Google, right, and list out the pros and cons, but there's got to be somebody out there with experience in helping people transition to the next best residence for their lifestyle.
There absolutely are. There's certified financial planners, there's estate planners. There are also services like Caring Transitions that will actually move you physically, like help you pack up your stuff, auction off what you're getting rid of. So there are absolutely services. There's the thing that I've noticed, and it's one of the things I think about in terms of like filling the needs of a marketplace, is there's not a comprehensive solution. So if you're like me in the sandwich generation and something happens to your parents, you're having to pull in experts from all of these different areas. So especially if you haven't hit Medicare age yet, you don't know all the rules about Medicare, all the rules about Social Security. There's so much to learn as we age and as our parents age.
Yeah. Let me ask you about fraud. I'm not accusing you of fraud. Let me ask you about the as we get older, we become more subjected to phishing, unsolicited emails about real estate. There is an industry, a cottage industry, I don't know what you call it, of ne'er-do-wells that are targeting this population with unsolicited real estate offers, etc. You really need to be vigilant. Your families need to be vigilant.
Absolutely. The Ohio Department of Commerce, they recently issued this consumer alert about wholesaling. So wholesaling, that's when an investor gets a homeowner to sell their house, usually for way less than market rate, turn the contract over to the other investor for a higher price, and then they put the profit in their pockets. Good way to make money fast. But the problem is, older people, they might not know the value of their home. They may not know, they're not keeping track of what's happening in their market. The other issue that I've seen is reverse mortgages. Reverse mortgages can be really positive for people if they need that money to stay in place. But a lot of times, if someone's approaching you, it's not necessarily going to be the most favorable offer. So if someone is considering a reverse mortgage, they really need to shop. They need to talk to their bank, and they need to talk to their family. I've heard so many times that older people, they're ashamed about maybe not having enough money. They don't want to burden their kids. They don't talk to their kids. The parent dies, the kids see the house, and they find out that there's a huge reverse mortgage on it that they had no idea existed. So communication and conversation is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Deidre, it's been an absolute pleasure not only talking to you about this issue on this episode, but in the previous episode. Really appreciate you joining us, and we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
Thank you.
And don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse, for all the news in one place. Details, of course, at our website. And your subscription helps support all this great BRN content. And as I said, we're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRN. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.